Hello classes, this is the fourth of the colored pencil worksheets, and in this one we'll be doing the last row of colored pencils. And just to remind you, the reason we're doing this is because there isn't just one approach to drawing with a colored pencil. When you're working on a drawing, you have to think, like any drawing, you have to think about what you need to get you to the effect you want. And this worksheet is just to let you know there's lots of different things you can do. You don't have to do any of these, but there are a few options for you. Okay, we have some things down here in the bottom row. What you need for supplies this time is the eraser shield, if you want it. I have a couple erasers here if I want to choose from them, or I can always use tape that's on the pencil. I have all 6 of the extra pencils that I bought for you. These are Prismacolor pencils, and you'll notice the quality is nicer. And then just find them in the bag. There's indigo blue, there's gray, there's the blender, there's a sky blue, which is a real pretty blue that we might want to use when we get to our project. We have black, and then the white, and then of course all the other colors you have. I'll mention it again, if you happen to have more of the artist quality pencils, like a full box of these Prismacolor pencils. So a lot of people have these. Go ahead and use these instead of these. They are definitely a little bit nicer, but as far as inexpensive qualities, these are the best ones. Okay, the first one we're going to do is color between color. I'm going to make my drawing a little larger for you again. Let's see. I'll even make it larger this time. I hope I don't get off the screen very far. And so what we're going to do this time, this is kind of an unusual technique, but it works. I'm going to go ahead and use the gray color. You just want a neutral color here. You could use black if you keep it really light, or you could use a brown, or just, really doesn't matter what color you use, but I kind of like using a neutral. So what we have is we have a square, and we're going to divide it into 4 sections, and then we're going to fill in kind of a medium value. If you haven't used, I guess you used a Prismacolor here. If you haven't really used them, then try the gray with me, because the gray is softer to use this nicer quality pencil, and you guys should all have one of these because I put it in your bag. If you don't, just use any color. So we're starting this with one colored background. We're going to fill it in nice and even, so I'm just adding some shading. We don't want it too dark. We do want those white little spots of paper to show up. And we want it all to look about the same. This is, again, kind of like a science experiment. We're going to compare things. So in this technique, we're doing something that's a little bit tricky. This is another artist level technique that you wouldn't think about, but it works pretty well. If I have a color, let's say gray, but it's not going along with the rest of the painting. The rest of the paintings, let's say orange or something, the gray just looks kind of terrible there. This is a way to get more harmony in my color so it works well. Another way of doing that would be just to blend in a little bit of another color. That's one method, but this is kind of a sneakier, less obvious way. So what we're going to do, we're going to leave one alone. I'll just write down that that one would be the control. You don't have to write this. So we're not going to do anything to the first one. To the second one, what we're going to do is take any one color. I happen to have blue. And where you see these little white specks, I'm just going to push down with my color a little bit and sneak some blue into these little white spots where I can see openings. What you're not doing, you're not going, because here you don't have a whole lot of control. I'm purposely looking for the white spots, so it's a little bit slower than that. The colored pencil is soft, so it will go into those little spots fairly easily. Just don't do that type of thing. Also, don't go like this. Don't push. You don't want globs or anything big. It's small and it's subtle. So I'm adding just a little bit of blue into some of these white spots. And what that's going to do is that's going to make this gray harmonize more with the blue colors in the drawing. Okay, now I'm going to pick another color. See, you can hardly tell, it still looks like gray. Now I'm going to pick another color. I'm going to do orange. Down here. Orange and gray usually are not good friends, but here we're going to try. And I'm going to do the same thing with my orange. I'm going to label. I'm going to push down a little bit of color into these white spots here and there. And I can already see a big difference between this one, and this one. So in the idea in the drawing, it's going to be very subtle. You're hardly going to notice that something has changed the gray, but it's going to make the gray harmonize a lot better with an orange drawing if I've snuck in a little bit of the orange. If I was like blending it, it'd be more obvious and it wouldn't have the same effect. So now I've added some orange. The pencil is really soft. You don't have to push very hard. Like I said, avoid blobs. You don't want them. Okay, and then I'm going to do it one more time with green. The color is better in person. It looks like on the camera we're not seeing the color quite as clear as I can see in person. But while you're doing it, you're going to notice a difference. I'm doing it one more time now with a green color. Just looking for those little dots and placing in the green. So this is called color between color. I don't personally use this technique very often, but on the other hand, I don't always make finished colored pencil drawings. If I do, they usually have a lot of lines. I have a technique I like to do. I should show you guys in a video. I'll bring in my drawing. Anyway, but it's a great technique and a kind of sneaky, nice way to do things. So that one looks a lot different. So you'll notice in your drawing, you can definitely tell a difference between the three colors. Yeah, it's hard to see on the camera. Okay, so that's a way that it has a specific purpose and it works. And I could always do like more, you know, if I needed even more of it, let's say in a certain spot, and that'd be fine. You have complete control over that. Okay, the next thing we're going to talk about is some shading. So what I'd like you to get, I don't use blue, no blue on this next one, and it needs to be one color. And also don't use yellow, of course. So use one color that is not blue. So I think I'm going to use, I do have a violet here. I thought I did. I'm not going to use that then. I think I'll go ahead and use a red color. So if we're doing shading, we have three options for shading. So what we're going to do, we're going to use variation of pressure, and I'm going to make 3 rows. So we want our 3 rows to be as similar and match each other as well as we can. So I just layer back and forth, like we've been doing for variation of pressure. And I'm gonna go back and forth until I get them to look nice and smooth, and go from as dark as I can to as light as I can. So working on these back and forth. You're going to do all 3 rows, like I said, of this. Now I'm assuming while you're working on this worksheet that it takes you, since I've done it before, although I'm talking when I'm drawing, you don't have to talk while you're drawing. And I'm thinking you'll spend at least as much time as I am, because it's maybe your first time doing these things. So take your time, do a nice job. That one got a tiny bit dark. So what I think I'll do on the end there, I'll just take my eraser and remove part of it. That was easy. Here's my next one. Like I said, I'm trying to get them pretty much the same, and we'll talk about how to do some shading. So the first option with shading is kind of obvious. You have your basic color, and you just make your color darker where it's a darker area and lighter where there's a lighter area. So that's what the first one is going to be. If we're doing some shading, you just leave it alone. So on that first one, I'll just write the word control. So that's how you would add maybe some heavier pressure when you want it to look like it's shaded in, and less pressure where it's not. The second one, we're going to go ahead and add some black. So I would, reach, you have two blacks, reach for your Prismacolor one if you have two like I do. And so what we're going to do this time, don't press down too hard, but we're lightly going to darken up that shaded area. I'm going to fade it into the color. We don't want to change the color any more than we have to. I'm going to take the black. Let's see, we want to get really, really dark with our shadow. So I'm going to get pretty dark right here and then just fade it out. And then what I would probably also do is finish. My last color will be on top of that. I'm going to add my color again to make sure my color stays obvious to the color that I'm trying to show. Okay, so black works really well for shading. The reason you would add black to your color is if you wanted, obviously, your shading to get a lot darker. Where this is only get you to a medium, this can get you to like a full 10, all the way dark. So obvious thing to do and just add black on top of your color. But there's a third choice. The only problem with black is it's not even on the color wheel. White's not either. Is it's kind of just, it's a complete neutral. So it's not really helping you make anything more interesting, aside from the fact it gets darker. So like we did right here, that helps make that gray a little more interesting. Black doesn't do that for you. It's completely neutral. What's nice about the colored pencil black is it does tend to be transparent. So you'll find that it's a nice black to work with. So it's a, works pretty well. However, it just adds a neutral. The color indigo blue is a wonderful transparent color. We already used it right here. And it's often used by artists instead of black for shading. So I'm gonna, and often in the shade it's cool. Just life experience, it's cool. And also feels cool. So the indigo here, I can still get pretty dark with it. And then it also is kind of gives you this nice transparent interesting color that might work in a nice way with your drawing. Now let's say in my drawing for some reason it's the desert or something, like it's a really, really warm drawing. Then I would not use indigo blue. But I might think about, oh, I could use maybe a dark brown for my shading, or could I just use the black? But indigo is a very popular color for shading. It's used by many artists. In art school, they probably won't even let you use black, especially with paints, because it kills the color. So whereas indigo is maybe your first choice for shading, and then if you don't use it, there's a reason why not. Okay, my next one is we're going to work with complementary colors, or color opposites, and they do some really special things when it comes to drawing. So I want you to choose one of these two. Either choose green and red, or find your violet and yellow, or your orange and blue. This is a nice, this is surrealness. You wouldn't want a normal blue. So pick one of these three combinations. So you want colors that are directly opposite on the color wheel. I'm going to go with red and green. It's up to you which one of these choices. They all look just a little bit different, but they all would work. So I'm going to choose red and green. So we're going to do some color overlapping. Complementary colors, or color opposites, they do more than one thing together. First of all, they're the highest amount of contrast. So if you want to do something exciting in a green painting, then you add some red. If you want to do something exciting in a red painting, add some green. So that's the first thing that they do. Right now I'm going to make one in green, one in red. The top half is going to be really heavy pressure, and the bottom half will be light. So I'm talking while I'm drawing this in if you want to do what I'm doing. So, so they have the highest amount of contrast, but they also tend to neutralize each other. So if you have a, let's say a green, and I want to make a neutral green, I add some red to it, then we create what's called a brown, which is a very neutral color. So if you add opposites together, you get neutrals, and the name of those neutrals is brown. Neutrals, brown. As opposed to a neutral, just if you're just randomly mixing a bunch of colors and eventually come up with a neutral color, it might be called a gray, it might be called a brown, or it might be called a mess. It's nice to have a color that has something to do with your drawing. When you're mixing colors, especially with paint, colored pencils, you have a little bit more control, but especially with paint, when you mix in neutrals, you get a brown that goes with your painting. It, you know, it's based on colors already in the paintings. Let's say I have a very green painting, then the brown that I create by adding red is a brown that has something to do with my green, so it's a brown that harmonizes, rather than just bringing in a random brown from nowhere, you know, just from my colors that I have. So if you create your own brown, especially with painting, it has a higher chance of being more interesting and working with the drawing or painting that much more. Okay, I'm almost done here. I have heavy pressure on top. Remember, I always finish with lines going in the same direction. And I really don't. I got too many lines in there. I kind of get rid of them a little bit. And then lighter pressure down below. So what we're going to do is we're going to practice making browns with colored pencils as opposed to paint where you put it all together and kind of stir it up. Usually one of the two colors is more dominant, so you'll have to adjust how much of the other color you add. In this case, the red's going to be a little bit stronger than the green. Okay, so this is how I start. I have two opposite colors, red and green. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to blend them together. So I'm going to take my my red here and put it on top of my green and add some heavy pressure right on top. And what that's going to do is create a color that's kind of neutral, and we call it a brown. And in a green drawing, this brown I just created will harmonize with the drawing. Since, like I said, it's a really strong kind of glowing color, and it also serves as a neutral in the drawing. And then here at the bottom, we're just going to do it really light. Like I added the green really light. I'm putting red on top of it really light, so it stays, it doesn't overpower it and get too strong. So we can do that lighter or darker, and that gives us a neutral. Now over here, we're going to mix in the opposite direction, so I'm putting green on top of red. It's also going to give us a brown, but it's probably going to look just a little different than the other brown. And what's nice about that is you could always practice that on scratch paper and see which one you like better. I like it better when you know, the red color is on top or the green color is on top. You know, whatever you prefer. So they are very similar though. So this is how you make a brown, mix two color opposites together. It's a glowing, a really strong brown, which has to do with your drawing. And then here I'm going to do it a little bit lighter. Right now it's the green right on top of the red. So I made this whole drawing with two opposite colors. I should have written that. I'll write it down now. Only two opposite colors. And that's how you make neutrals and browns in a perfect world. Okay, and now we're on the very last one, and this one is all about analogous colors. Analogous colors are similar colors. So in my drawing, you could draw just about anything. I'm going to choose blues and a purple. If you want, you could choose reds and yellows or whatever you want to do. But I'm going to show you two samples of of just a difference. If you choose just one color, let's say I make a little drop of rain right here. If you choose just one, you know, okay, here's my little drop. I left a little kind of reflection in it. Maybe it's darker over here and a little bit darker there. Okay, let's say that's a drop. If I make the same drop, it's not all that pretty, is it? If I'll up the line a little bit. If I make the same drop, let's say, but this time, when I'm working on it, I add some variation to my color. So let's say I still have it being mostly this color, but I also include a little bit of hints of some other similar colors, but not exactly the same. Right now I'm adding some purple. Now I'm going to add some darker blue. So what I've done, I'm still mostly using my first color, but I've added some variety to the color. And it's a much more rich drawing, much more interesting than the first one. So analogous colors, it just means include some colors in there. Add some extra color, bits of color here and there to your drawing. You don't have to stick with one exact, just because it's blue doesn't mean it's all the same blue everywhere. Colors actually bounce around. So think about adding bits of other colors. Now in this case, especially if I had a purple painting, why not sneak some purple into here? Or if I had a red, you know what I mean? So add similar types of things, sneaking in there. It's still blue, but it's more interesting because I added a range in the colors right there. So that's our final one. You're going to submit this to the assignment when you're done. I know it took a little bit more time, and I hope you didn't mind. I hope you enjoyed the project, the finished project. I'll just show you what the finished project's going to look exactly like this. I'll make it a little bit larger, so if you need to work on any of your drawings that we already did, you can look at this image right here and finish it off. So thank you very much, and hope you enjoyed learning about colored pencil techniques.